Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and I'm joined today by Martin van Staden. Martin, how are you doing?
Good on yourself. It's great to be back.
I'm doing pretty good. A little bit low energy, but otherwise very good. And also, Miss Sara Gon. Sara, how are you?
I can identify with the low energy stuff, yeah, but
Before I get started, let's have a word from our sponsor. We are once again sponsored this episode by Bitvice. And so Bitvice says exchanges are crashing, banks are on the run and being bailed out, and the money printer is going brrr faster than ever. Bitcoin was built for this, but it's worthless if it's kept on an exchange which then collapses. Enter Bitvice, South Africa's only place to buy Bitcoin and have it sent directly to your own self-custody. That means should Bitvice ever shut down, your Bitcoin is entirely safe as it is fully in your control, like having gold in your own safe at home rather than at a bank with only a receipt to prove ownership. Bitvice offers advice on how to set up the best self-custody solution to achieve maximum security for your Bitcoin and keep it safe during the tumultuous times ahead. To make accumulating Bitcoin even easier, Bitvice's SAT Stacker allows you to set up a repeat purchase of Bitcoin on a weekly or monthly basis. Bitvice is the safest way to accumulate Bitcoin. Head over to bitvice.io and set up your account today, or click the link in the description of this YouTube video or the podcast, if you're listening to us on audio only, to find more about SAT Stacker. And we thank them very much for sponsoring today's episode. Right. Well, I hope everyone who's taken today off to enjoy a long weekend, because of course tomorrow is Human Rights Day, is enjoying it. But let's talk a little bit about the so-called national shutdown, which has been much touted in the media and by the economic freedom fighters. So there were many fears from some people about what may happen today. The EFF, shall we say, it's not got the best relationship with following the rules. And indeed, there were apparently some attempts to block roads and to slide tires and that kind of thing around the country last night. But it doesn't seem like all too much happened. The police this morning put out a statement saying that 87 people were arrested, 41 in Gauteng, the rest in North Wales and Free State, as well as some other arrests that they don't detail in Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape. In connection to causing disruptions, blocking roads. The police also highlighted the fact that they say that they have confiscated 24,300 tires to prevent them being used to block roads and set alight, with the largest share coming from the Western Cape. And just generally speaking, it seems that most of the incidents of kind of law and disorder have been quite small. As for with regards to the actual shutdown of business and that kind of thing, the picture is a little bit more complicated. I think generally speaking, everyone agrees that it's a pretty slow day today, because a lot of people are taking the Monday off so they can get a 4-day weekend. But there were definitely some businesses that did shut down in fear of possible law disorder today. The EFF has already declared victory in bringing the country to a standstill. I think with not that much justification, but have been tweeting out photos of every single closed shop they can possibly find anywhere on social media. They have also tried to stage protests across the country, some of which have been sort of reasonably sized, but there were quite a few. And there was a viral video that I saw, which was quite amusing, where 12 EFF protesters were attempting to shut down the town of Volkom, which just caused the local... The guy recording the video, he's counting them and he's just laughing at how small the group is, because he says this is the national shutdown. It's only 12 people. So it looks pretty much like it hasn't been that successful. I know a lot of businesses, however, were quite kind of trigger happy, and that I have a friend who does deliveries, and he says that after one of their drivers ran into some kind of problem, they pulled all of them off the road. So that probably has meant that the economy is slower today than it otherwise would be on any other normal potential long weekend. So, Martin, let me start with you. What do you make of this national shutdown thing? Do you think it was a success for the EFF? Do you think it was a bit of a damn squib? Do you think it was what's your take on it?
Yeah, it depends entirely what their goal was. I mean, we were chatting a bit before the show. If their goal was to create media excitement and make suburbanites shiver a little bit, then I think probably quite successful. I'm in many WhatsApp groups where people from my family and so on shared quite alarmist messages from, oh, everybody watch out, the police aren't going to be around on Monday, it's going to be chaos, stay home and so on. So I mean, people were scared. So if that was the plan, to generate media interest and so on, very successful. The media has been on this national shutdown for at least a week, the whole day, every day. So that's very successful. If we're asking, is this July 2021 again? No, then it's certainly a failure. Because what we saw with that riot, and I think this is probably true for any large scale protest in South Africa that does the type of damage that I think Malema and his friends would have wanted to see done, isn't something that you announce beforehand to the press and plan out. It just doesn't work that way. It's something that's generated from outrage in the moment, and it boils over, like we saw with Jacob Zuma's arrest and so on. There's certainly some planning and coordination in the background, but it's not a media event. This was a media event more than anything else. The EFF is very good at saying, okay, we're going to do targeted looting or whatever. We're going to destroy H&M shops. So meet us at this H&M shop or this Clicks or whatever they want to do. Yeah, you get a few guys together, you ransack the place, you're in the media. But this is big. To say we're going to shut down the whole country, I don't think the EFF has the numbers for that. And you have to bear in mind, Marxist-Leninism has never been a real movement of the people. South Africa's poor people have much more important things to worry about. So it's very much an intellectual movement, the EFF. And I think their ground forces, as they like to call them, are probably mostly made up of people in the middle class and so on, who wouldn't want to be seen getting their hands dirty as they would expect the plebs to do. So I don't think the EFF is ever going to be at the vanguard, as they would say, of any type of popular uprising. They might certainly exploit such a thing and benefit from it, but I'm not sure that they have the numbers or very really the nature to make it happen. Then again, as I always say when we discuss the EFF, the fact that its national leadership was so blasé and casual about announcing how much damage they're going to do, and it's great and it's fine, we're going to shut the economy down. I mean, warning lights. It's totally disgusting for a country in our current position for senior political leaders to be saying things like that. And that really gives us insights into how the EFF would participate in government if it were ever to get that type of electoral support. So as always, we need to learn from this. We need to learn what the EFF really wants to do, and that is destroy, destroy, destroy. And we need to vote accordingly, but also if we might be in the media, there's been a tendency in the media to treat the EFF as the rowdy little kids. Oh, it's so exciting and so on. No, it's hugely destructive. It's a very problematic movement, and more South Africans need to become very aware of that.
So, Sara, I just want your thoughts in general on this, but also what's been quite interesting is it really does seem like government was terrified of something like a repeat of July 2021. And I've heard from lots of people that there were a lot of police out there today on the streets, which is a welcome change. One has, I'm going to say, one's opinion of the South African police service has gotten quite low over the last few years in particular. But it seems today as if there was a little bit more proactive activity. The stuff about confiscating tires and stuff. I'm not an expert in strategic planning and law enforcement stuff, but that does seem like a more positive development than we usually get, which is that there's kind of this sort of respond to the fact kind of haphazardly after the fact, which isn't really very effective. So it looks like the police seem to have done a reasonable job so far today, as far as I can tell. There are, I think, still some protests ongoing, so we'll have to see what happens. But do you have any more thoughts on how the protest is going?
I wonder, I agree about that. Isn't the 2021 situation, and I think for all the reasons Martin's put are correct. But I wonder whether we haven't reached that point, given how bad things are in the country, that the EFF's message isn't resonating. You're getting, let's go out in the streets and shut the businesses at which you're employed, for which you may be docked money, on which the people in your house rely. And there's also I think we've a tendency that South Africans, we march a lot. So I think the message for however sort of crafty this was on Julius Malema's part, and it was, because particularly with regard to the media success, I think that was the most successful aspect of this of today. I'm not sure it had the traction it might have had 5 years ago. Even I think people actually, they were marching against the same things that absolutely every single one of us is pissed off about. Absolutely everyone. So it's like saying, okay, we're going to march to show you how much we care about the fact that the government does this wrong, does that wrong, does that wrong. It's like water off a duck's back. I think for us, I think we've probably reach a stage where people actually want to see what political parties can offer to them, not expect them to sacrifice, but actually can offer to them. It's nursery school at this stage. It's effective, but as I say, I mean, the media made Julius Malema. He is a creature of the media, and that is one area he will always be popular in, because the media, he fills airtime.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, even if we put Julius in the in the thumbnail of the show, and very few people who watch the show are fans of the EFF, we get a lot more clicks than usual. So you can see why the media has this kind of perverse incentive to really talk about him, because he is that kind of polarizing sort of figure. But yeah, I must say, it's Martin. Any let me move on to this aspect of it, which is, I think, quite interesting. So there's the shall we say, controversial figure, Nhlanhla Lux Dlamini, who is the founder of Operation Tadula, the anti-foreigner movement, although he's no longer officially with them, although he says he still cooperates with them, I believe. I think he calls himself now the leader of the Soweto Parliament. He put out video on social media of himself claiming credit for what he says is arresting some EFF branch chairs who were trying to start chaos in Soweto. But interestingly, it seems like someone threw 2 bombs at his house in the early hours of this morning. Now, he's clashed with the EFF before, I believe, when Operation Tadula accused an EFF leader in Soweto of selling drugs and attempted to, I think, attack his house or harass him, and then the EFF tried to retaliate, and it was a big mess. But he I think, stands in as a sort of representative for these kind of new political forces that aren't necessarily represented in the political parties, but have the potential to have quite a lot of impact on the country. Martin, what do you make of the attempted or the bombing of Nhlanhla Lux's house?
Yeah, I mean, I've been following him on and off since the riots in July 2021, when he appeared in full U.S. Army fatigues, interestingly enough. And I thought that was quite... I think his heart was in the right place. And in this video that is going around of him, he also goes out of his way to emphasize, listen, we have a collapsing state. South African communities should probably take the initiative in securing themselves and helping themselves, and that really resonates with me as somewhat of a libertarian. So I'm quite impressed by that. I'm on the other hand, I'm quite wary of his populist appeal, and specifically his anti-immigrant rhetoric that he gets into. I think that definitely undermines his other message of community upliftment and securing yourself against the forces of chaos, which I think is great. And I also appreciate that he said that even though the EFF or whoever has bombed his house, he doesn't believe that there should be a retaliation against them violently or against their families, which they apparently have now tried to perpetrate against them. So I certainly appreciate that message, but it does show that South African politics are getting violent. It's been violent at the municipal level for a long time. But now that community activists and so on, who are very much in the national spotlight, are being so brazenly targeted as well, is definitely cause for concern. That's certainly something that one would want to de-escalate before we get to the 2020, very important 2024 elections that might change South Africa's political landscape entirely. So, I mean, it's definitely a warning sign. I do hope they can find proof of who exactly did this. Everyone's saying it's the EFF so far. They've obviously denied it already. But yeah, I don't think it's preposterous to suppose that on the eve of an EFF protest, one of the key people who opposed the protest would be attacked. So yeah, it's very concerning, and I wish Nhlanhla looks all the best when it comes to organizing what you just referred to, Nick. Almost that right wing, unrepresented aspect of our electorate, a very dangerous part of politics, no doubt. But if it's not given a political outlet, it might be even more dangerous. So I hope he channels his energies in a more productive, a more formal political avenue, and I think he'll do pretty well. And that might actually benefit our democracy. If these discussions can be had in Parliament rather than being fought over and in an explosion of xenophobic violence, for instance.
No, definitely something to keep an eye on. Sara, any final thoughts on this? Also, any comments on the idea that the EFF perhaps has not been able to make the splash they hope because there's sort of a lack a bit of credibility here right now, as they're saying, we need to end load shedding, we need to end inequality, we need to liberate the country, we need to get rid of Cyril Ramaphosa. The EFF is in coalition with the ANC in a large number of municipalities around the country.
Yeah, I think that's the real weakness, is the fact that you need to be effective. You actually need a single demand, and to have 5 or 6 demands that cannot be achieved in probably my lifetime it looks a bit naff, and that's what I mean about losing the energy, losing the thrust.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. This is once again a high-profile assassination in the news. And this is of a slightly different kind to what we've had before. So generally, when people get assassinated in South Africa, it's people involved with taxis or people involved in politics. Well, the country has seen recently a number of high-profile liquidators, Pluty and Thomas Murray, who appear to have been killed in a hit when their car was, it looks like, rammed by another car, and they were shot up. Both this guy and his son died. They were liquidators involved in a number of high-profile cases. They had kind of a long list of enemies. They had liquidated the estates of people who were either suspected of being former gangsters or were confirmed to have, by criminal conviction, have been former gangsters. And they were recently looking into money that was owed to Bosasa, the very corrupt company which was involved in the kind of state capture stuff. And in 2021, Murray caused a 3.6 million rand claim to be filed against the ANC, money which was apparently, according to him, owed by the ANC to Bosasa. So, Sara, what do you make of this story? The fear coming out of the media here is that people who are into this kind of high-profile liquidation stuff and involved in actually, like, recovering stolen money and that kind of thing are just not gonna take these cases anymore because the risk is too high.
I think that's the intention. It may have been the intention to liquidate, sorry, I used the wrong term. Oh, God. It may have been the intention to kill them because they were working on something that is really high profile. The problem with liquidation, I think the intention is to scare people. I think the intention is to put them in a situation where the great and the bad will not be liquidated because the liquidators are afraid, and they've been meant to be afraid. It may be more specific than that. He certainly he's sort of, the list of who is liquidated is, it's like a who's who. I can't even remember the extent, but it included some of the Gupta people. It went across the board. I mean, literally, there is no one they did not liquidate who hasn't appeared on the pages of most of the newspapers. So I'm sure that's what the intent. It could have been one or the other or both. It's always makes one feel very uneasy when you're essentially looking at administrative people who face something like this. I mean, it's bad enough, I gather, that the people who did the business rescue of SAA would never do something like that again, because it sort of tore their life apart. And that didn't involve death, although death threats were probably part of the scene. And it's just become so easy that there's a shock, and there's a sense of sorrow for the family, but there's not a sense that this is unusual. This is very business as usual. And I think our former deputy president has played an influence in this method of terminations.
Well, we'll get on to that in a minute, but Martin, what do you make of this story? We've really seen, it seems like this year, a ramping up of the kind of use of assassination. Had a couple of high-profile ones this year, and it has, I think, really beginning to make us sort of ask the question, is our political culture kind of headed for that mafia state thing, which used to be more confined to kind of, like councillors in KZN, or the occasional contract here or there in the rural provinces of South Africa, but the prevalence seems to be going way up.
Yeah, no, look, for me, the standout thing is, and I mean, I have a very dim view of South Africa's police in general, but every now and then I watch a documentary on Showmax, and they have some very high quality stuff there, where you see that, hey, there are actually very good detectives in the South African police service. They're still there. They know how to do the job, and so on, and they ultimately catch whoever did the crime. But it seems like in cases like this, let's call it almost political crimes. I mean, really, at the end of the day, this is probably what it comes down to. There's probably a very high-profile politician very close to this crime and to other crimes of this ilk. You seem to get the very worst of what the SAPS can offer. In the article that you sent us, Nick, there's a very brief mention that evidence was left in the car of the deceased. The police came, they did something, and then they drove off, leaving evidence right there, presumably for someone else to find. You're never going to create a deterrence to this type of crime if what is, I'm surmising, happening in the background is the upper echelons of our government saying, listen, don't solve it, because if we solve it, something might come out that might unravel the whole patronage structure that our government functions on. Even if the individual giving the instructions is not involved, even if that person has the best intentions in the world, they understand that if this crime is solved, it's all going to come apart. So you're never going to get to the bottom of it if you don't have the very best that the police can offer investigating. And we already see that that's not the case here. So my mind has certainly drifted more towards civil society, private investigators, and increasingly opposition parties really coming together and saying, listen, we're not going to get to the bottom of the extent of government corruption in this country unless we do it ourselves. The Zondo Commission was I think almost a quirk, because Jacob Zuma thought he was probably going to have control over the commission, and then he found himself out of a job, and then the thing just took on a life of its own. And you can't really put your faith in repeats of the Zondo excellence going forward. I think civil society probably has to go out of its way and say, we need to save the political system from the outside, and the only way to do that is to get our own private investigators on that. We get our own commissions of inquiry, probably with only opposition MPs and so on involved. It's going to lack the teeth of the government, but I mean, if the government really isn't interested in the first place, which I think ultimately is the result, then there's no teeth whatsoever. So it's another example where I think civil society and the broad opposition in South Africa will need to start taking a far more proactive role in the combating of high stakes corruption, as we see here.
All right, so let's move on to our next topic, which is a related one, and this is comments made about our former Deputy President, David Mabuza. It's already been mentioned in the comments, actually, and you alluded to earlier, Sara. DA leader John Steenhuisen in Parliament the other day accused David Mabuza of being at the center of the corruption in Eskom, and at least the guy who was referred to as a senior figure in the ANC government who was involved in corruption. De Ruyter did mention this, but didn't say who it was. When the journalist asked him whether this senior figure in government was in cabinet, he simply laughed and said, "Let's not even go there." Steenhuisen alleges that the person referred to there is in fact David Mabuza, who was formerly the premier of Mpumalanga and is well known to have lots of connections into that area, an area which has both Eskom power stations and a lot of coal. So it's pretty important for Eskom, and there's a lot of contracts related to it there. Steenhuisen said, "We all know who this person being referred to as. It's Mr. D.D. Mabuza, and we all know how connected he is within the ANC, and we all know how terrified the ANC is of him, De Ruyter releasing his information. That is the reality here today. The ANC is going to wait until he's safely in Russia, just like it waited for the Guptas to be in Dubai and Mr. Agrizi to be in Italy before Parliament slowly gets off and does anything." Also, in addition to this, he called for I think an ad hoc committee to investigate this through Parliament. The ANC responded by saying that Steenhuisen was putting the cart before the horse, that these allegations had not been properly tried before, and that we really shouldn't get too overly excited about the bitterness of Mr. De Ruyter. And Mr. De Ruyter was called a childish by an ANC MP. For that interview. Sara, what do you make of this? What do you make of the fact that, as you pointed out this morning, it doesn't really look like the presidency has said much about the fact that the deputy president appears to have been accused directly of the highest levels of corruption?
Well, I think what's interesting is that is nothing. Nothing has happened. Mabuza hasn't denied it. Cyril hasn't denied it. Somebody's media liaison nobody's denied it. Nobody says it couldn't possibly be him or they've got the wrong person. I mean, it's well known that Mabuza's, I suppose, was always a bit of a mafia kingpin when he governed Mpumalanga. There are assassinations that have been linked to him but not proven. I saw a reference to a contract that went through Eskom that netted him, I think, 30 million rand. I think most of us worked out that it probably was, given all those sort of factors, it probably was him. But nobody's saying anything about anything. And I think one comment was that we don't need to set up an ad hoc committee because this will go through the other committees, the process of looking at problems with Eskom. Okay, if you want to believe that, you're welcome to it. I wouldn't be surprised if Mabuza's reach and reputation would have had something to do with his support for Cyril, who took that support. I mean, the man retires as the deputy president recently, given a send-off of note. He's hailed to the skies, and he will go on to have a pension from here to eternity. I do mean eternity until he dies. So I'm just kind of waiting for the investigative media to get on to the specifics, because it's extraordinary. The deputy president of the country is accused of being a mafia kingpin, and nobody says anything.
Martin, in about 30 seconds or so, your final thoughts.
Yeah, look, building on my previous point, I think that there's room here for some real investigation. That's not going to come from the South African Police Service. It's certainly not going to come from Parliament, whether it's an ad hoc committee or a standing portfolio committee. It's simply not going to happen. So if the DA, I mean, clearly there's some kind of information that the DA has gotten a hold of. And I think try it. Go to the NPA, say we have this evidence. Maybe it's not great, and the NPA says we don't think your evidence is great. We're not going to prosecute. Then privately prosecute it. Even if you're going to lose that case, at least go to court. Get that opportunity through the rules of court to demand records and so on, to give yourself more information. It's a risky enterprise, but I think it will buy the opposition and the broad anti-corruption front in South Africa a lot of credibility and respect. If for a change it really puts its money where its mouth is. If there's a real strong suspicion that Mabuza is involved, with it, go for it and privately prosecute him for it, and plan to lose, of course, but at least there would be something on the record. At least there would be an opportunity to get more records that previously weren't in the public domain, rather than the mere allegation. Because we've seen this play over and over in South Africa for the last 2 decades. These allegations, and it just goes nowhere. Someone needs to grow a spine and just go for it.
And with that, we'll close up for today. Thank you very much once again to BitVice for sponsoring us. And we will see you not tomorrow, because it is Human Rights Day, and I hope you all enjoy the day off, but on Wednesday for the Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone.